One of the challenges a leader has is keeping everyone positive during times of change. What would you say if I told you it's not as difficult as you might be led to believe? Today, I'm going to share some suggestions that you can start implementing right away. If you're leading a team through lots of change, this one's for you. Let's dive in. I've been talking a lot about change recently. Why? Because everywhere we turn, there's change. Businesses of all sizes are changing. Change is the one constant in life, yet it's also the one thing that most people struggle with. Intellectually, everyone recognizes that things do have to change in order to keep pace with business. That doesn't make it easy. As a leader, this means others are relying on you, especially when things are changing. Whether you realize it or not, you're being watched. Your team is observing what you say and what you don't say. They're paying attention to how you communicate, and the manner in which you carry yourself reveals a lot about how you feel about changes. Even if the change is causing you stress, it's important for you, the leader, to stay positive and lead your team through the obstacles and the challenges that change by design introduces. So this begs the question, how do you keep everyone positive when things are changing? After all, there's bound to be someone on your team who's going to complain, someone who isn't on board, and someone who feels like it's just all too much to deal with. Let me simplify it for you. Before I do, I want to highlight something that I think is really important. It's okay if someone on your team is not 100% on board with the change you're rolling out. I want you to let that sink in. It's okay. I've seen many leaders lose their shit just because one or two people on our team doesn't like a specific change. You have to come to terms with the fact that you can't please everybody. This is business. It's not personal. I remember standing up in a leadership workshop I did a while back, and I was telling everybody in the room that my job wasn't to get 100% of the room to like me. And they're all like puzzled. My job, like theirs, is not to get 100% of the team to my team to like me. I then went on to tell them that our jobs as leaders is simply to convert a majority of the team into raving fans and have at least two people that could act as my wingmen. That's it. And I remember a CEO who was in the room at the time pulled me aside afterwards and he told me he just loved that. He realized at that moment that was his problem. He was trying to get 100% of the people on board with the recent change he introduced. After hearing me speak, he realized that all he needed was a majority and a few messengers who could help him get others on board. I told him the messengers were the key. Why is that important? Because every leader needs to lean on others to help them carry the flag. Now let's get back to the question at hand. How to keep everyone positive during lots of change. And I'm going to tie my answer to that into what I just previously described here in a second. The answer really is simple. Little victories. See, you, the leader, have to seek out every opportunity to highlight what's working. Trust me, there's going to be plenty of things that don't go as planned. That you have to expect. I've sat through way too many meetings where it quickly turns into a bitch fest about some recent change that occurred. For those of you who are in my Growth Champions group, you know firsthand that I always ask one simple question. That question is this: what went well last week? Where did you catch yourself or your team making meaningful progress? And I usually ask this question towards the end of the meeting, and trust me, every single time the mood shifts in a positive way. I typically go around the horn and I ask everyone what their one recent victory was. If they can't find one win in the last week, they probably don't deserve to be in a leadership position. And I know that sounds harsh, but seriously, that's the truth. One guy said to me one time that he couldn't find anything positive in the last week. They had just lost a client and the team didn't know what was going to happen. Sorry, Riv, no good news to report. I was like, hold on. Now, many of you know me and you know that I would never let that pass. I said, wait a second. Isn't this the client that has been treating your team like shit for the past year? He said, yep. I said, isn't this the client that your team has been complaining about all the time because regardless of what they did or do, they can never make them happy? And isn't this the same client that forces you and your team to work nights and weekends? He said, yep, absolutely. but it's also Riv, our largest client. And then I asked him another question. I said, isn't this the client that two of your team members recently resigned over in the last month? And he said, yeah. I said, dude, losing this client is a major win. And he finally got what I was trying to say. He smiled and said, yeah, it's actually a major relief. And I think the team feels the same way too. Every time I force someone to roll back the last 7 days and identify something that went well, their entire mood shifts. Usually here's what happens. When I ask the question, first thing that happens, I get crickets, silence. No one wants to start. Everyone struggles to identify something. So what do I do in that situation? I lean into my rock stars, my sidekicks, my wingmen, my messengers, whatever you want to refer to them. I call on one of them to get the conversation started. And I save the other one to close out the discussion. Key takeaway, bookend the discussion with your best people. I tell them that this is an opportunity to brag. Brag about something they did or something someone on their team did over the last week. Once you get that conversation started, it's magical to observe. As soon as someone mentions something, it quickly becomes a feeding frenzy. Next thing you know, people are like volunteering, like, I'll go next. I never, ever have had a situation where that didn't happen. You, the leader, just have to draw it out of them. And I know that sounds like common sense, but guess what? Common sense is not always common practice. I know that what I just described sounds so simple. And you know what? It is. I'm a big believer that little victories stitched together over time lead to big changes. Do this, try it. Don't take my word for it. Put it into practice. Close your next meeting by asking everyone to identify one victory they had or victory someone on their team had in the last week. Encourage them to brag. Let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear your comments. It is your responsibility to keep everyone positive during times of change. What I just described isn't reserved just for meetings and calls. You, the leader, have to actively be hunting for little victories all the time. It's not just a matter of catching others doing something right. It's teaching your leaders how to help them identify what is working on their team. The more they can recognize and actually see progress within their team, they become more willing to navigate the challenges that any change introduces. If you want more tools like this, like the ones I just shared, I'd love to buy you a copy of my book, Freedom to Experiment, How to Ignite a New Level of Energy, Focus, and Momentum in yourself and your team. I included a link in the description. Just follow the link. You know what? I'll personally sign a copy for you. If you want to explore ways that you can elevate your leadership or develop and retain the leaders on your team, I also included a link in the description to schedule some time on my calendar. I would love, absolutely love to help you and your team champion growth for your business. Okay, if you like what I shared today, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment related to your business below, and of course subscribe, because each week I'm sharing content to help you and your team embrace change, focus your efforts, and accelerate results. Remember this, you're just one idea away. Talk to you soon.